territories are freed. And there's no answer to these questions, and maybe we don't have these answers either, but we believe that we should raise these issues and put them in the focus of public attention. And we should start dialogue in order to define some points of view, and then society can take its decisions. And it should be done through referendums and other participation. I represent my colleagues who are now here in order to express their opinion. We are going to work like this. First, 5 minutes for each participant to speak on the strategy as to Donbas, and then we are going to answer questions and we will discuss some ideas. And we start from my left, and first is given the floor to is given to sociologist and Mykhailo Vynnytskyi. Thank you. And in at some meetings, I am given the floor the first. So I would like to tell you that what is going on in Ukraine is that the problem of separatism is very important. Of course, there are some differences, but as you know, I was born in Canada, and I lived there for more than 26 years, and 2 referendums took place in Canada as to separation Quebec. And at the last referendum at 1994, about 20 years ago, separatist movement got a lot of support, and Canada could collapse then in 2 parts, and this problem disappeared in the last 20 years. And I think the lesson for us can be that when there's a climax of differences, the problem of the problems of separation, and we have decisions and we have solutions to these problems. There are some differences because in Quebec there was no third party in this process. France supported this, but there was no armed conflict then. And separatism of Donetsk and in Donbas, it doesn't have the same grounds as in other parts of the world. But we should say that from those people who are left in Donbas, there are a lot of people who do not like the idea of unified Ukraine, and it's not what they like for their future. They don't see them in as the part of this country. And the question is, do the rest of Ukraine want to see Donbas as a part of Ukraine? And this issue can be solved even not through our will, because the Minsk agreement and the negotiation process, it is focused on the fact that in the some framework of international borders, Donbas should return to Ukraine and the Crimea as well. But it's not only territory, it's people, and the question is what should be done and what to do with people, with these people. And the experience of Canada, and maybe this is some sort of provocative, people in Donbas should agree that they want to be a part of Ukraine. And secondly, the wish to hear Donbas, and this is a form in which people try to get some special rights. And the example of Canada shows that separatist movement ended and died after the rest of Canada said, if you want to be independent, be independent. And in the result, they this blackmail of separatists, it lost its political grounds. And we should think about whether we want that Donbas returned and what will be conditions for this return. And maybe there can be some blackmail that they want to be heard before this armed conflict. And in any case, our strategies should be built on the fact that there should be some sort of reconciliation, and then the decision from both sides that we are entities, and entities that are that are equal. And if this is not on equal basis, so we shouldn't agree on this. And with deep respect, I give the floor to Father Georgiy Kovalenko. I wrote 4 words that I wanted to base my speech: truth, dialogue, and starting with truth. The truth is that my mom was born in Svetogirsk, and my relatives live in Slavyansk. And the truth is, I was born in other place in the east of Ukraine. This is a Russian-speaking settlement, and in the summer I went to Svetogirsk, and there my great-grandmother said, Yura, remember, we are Ukrainians. And this was in Donbas. And the truth is that after Holodomor, hunger, after this, a lot of people came to this territory that are not from Ukraine. And the truth is that everyone who had opportunity and have a pro-Ukrainian position, they left Donbas. The truth is that people with pro-Ukrainian position stayed in Donbas, and there are circumstances that prevented them from leaving, and they can't voice their position. And the truth is that there are a lot of people who don't see Donbas as part of Ukraine, or they want to see it as a part of Russia or as a restored USSR. And the situation, in order to restore justice, we should take into account opinions of a lot of people that have connections to Donbas. So these are people who stayed there, those who came there, and those who are who left to other parts of Ukraine, and we see them in the streets, and also with we see their cars, and these are people who have right to also define the faiths of Donbas. And that's why, first of all, if we are speaking about the discussion of this issue, we should take into account the position not only of those who now, with the support of Russian propaganda, speak on behalf of today's Donbas. Without reconciliation, the dialogue is impossible. It's just negotiation to stop fire or to exchange captives. But I believe that we should start the dialogue, but in this dialogue, we should remember about all those people I spoke about. They have the right to decide, and also the right to decide the fate of Donbas is in the competence of the whole Ukrainian people, because there were some hard times for them. They suffered from Holodomor occupation, and also the Second World War, and also they suffered from resettlement of people from different regions, and also now there are difficult times when a new identity is created and new political and national and regional myths are created. And we see that in this situation, there are some foreign players who play these cards, and here there should be some platforms for dialogue, a place for coordination, and as of today there's no such platform, and the religious community cannot be this platform. And there are some events in Kiev where the Council of Churches was the platform for dialogue between people and power, and the church had authority and trust among people and politicians. But now we see that in the territory of part of Lugansk and Donetsk oblasts, there are problems with conscious freedom, and also some problems, clashes between different confessions, and we see that it's very difficult for church to lead this communication among people. And we hope that we can find some people who would have enough trust and who can support the dialogue that can lead to reconciliation, and for the decision of this problem, and to embody the truth we are speaking about. Thank you, and I give the floor to Andriy Dlihach, who is the professor and activist. Thank you.
Just like Father Georgiy, I would like to concentrate on 4 words: the IDPs, the strategy, the resettlement. The first is strategy, subject strategy of Ukraine in addressing the issue of Crimea. There is no strategy. The hot stage of hostilities in Donbas provided the opportunity to Ukraine for half a year to propose and discuss the problem of Crimea, the strategy of addressing the Crimea issue. But instead of that, the Eastern Ukraine factor is used to explain why modernization in Ukraine is impossible. This factor is used not to develop Ukraine, but to explain the lack of opportunity to reform Ukraine. No Minsk agreements can help Ukraine, can save Ukraine, if the corrupt component and the oligarchy will remain in Ukraine. This is a transparent matter both in Ukraine and in Europe now, and Ukraine will no more be supported if Ukraine, unless Ukraine address the corruption and implement the reforms we can offer to the Crimea, the strategy of return to Ukraine, the strategy of reintegration. Only in the case if Ukraine will propose such relationship inside of the country, such economy which is more attractive than the conditions proposed by the Russian world, so-called Russian world. Thousands of IDPs from the bus should play important part in molding the destiny of Donbas, but unfortunately we see that this issue of seeking unity, of striving to gain unity in Donbas region, this issue has been lifted from the agenda, and even those romantic persons which were present in LPR, DPR governments, they are no more in place there. So the issue of the east of Ukraine remains unresolved, and the communication by the government of Ukraine to its citizens and broadcasting to the territory of Donbas and Lugansk region, we know that most of people there in the east of Ukraine and in the Crimea, they are mental hostages of the Russian world, and they proposed to them values and the vision proposed to them by the Russian Federation, which broadcast to them. So we should change the picture of the world, their vision of the world, and to change the image of Ukraine into the country attractive in all terms. And this requires systemic changes in the civil service and justice system reform, and primarily the new constitution. What we are talking about in today's declaration, this is the need to create a new Ukrainian constitution. Thank you, Andriy. My 5 minutes. I will start with the historical excursion. When people live in one country, they should know the answer to the question why they should live together, and the territory of uniting and disuniting, which we can find in many parts of the world, are very demonstrative. Some time ago, Ukrainian people were divided among two big empires for centuries with different religions and confessions and different cultures and different names, because the western part remains named Russians. At some moment in history, those people decided that they are the one united people, and due to the war, those people were divided. This is the case of Germany when it was divided into Western and Eastern Germany after the war. As a result of the war, the situation in the Eastern Germany those days resembles the situation in the east of Ukraine we now experience. Many years were required for those Eastern Germans to integrate into the Western Germany, into the United Germany. As far as I remember, 4 years before the fall of the Berlin Wall, we had the dispute whether the Berlin Wall would ever fall, and it fell after 4 years after our dispute. This history may provide us several lessons. The walls may fall all of a sudden due to some events in the world which are unpredictable and which are of low probability. And after the fall of the walls, much money, much efforts are needed to integrate those people who have been living in different systems, in different countries, even for some not long time. And the third lesson is that the difference will remain for many years. Even now, there are some problems in Eastern Germany, or they at least were present for some period after the uniting of Germany. The same concerns Korea, where there are two different worlds. So sometimes is required to divide people, and sometimes is required to unite people and to end with. There are different scenarios, but I support Andriy Dlihach, my colleague, that the issue what to do with Donbas may be answered when we will find the answer what we want to do with Ukraine in general. So, for example, we can look into the example of Germany when German Marshall Plan was implemented to turn Germany into the industrialized country with a wealthy country. Where the more attractive model of economy is in place. In that country, people would like to live. So the first thing, we should make Ukraine wealthy and independent, both in political and economic terms, and then we will propose Donbas to join us. And third, maybe some people will be forced to flee from those territories, but we should focus on ourselves in the first turn. And I'm giving the floor to Oleksandr Tkachenko, a producer.
And what bothers me in the situation, and there are no public discussions on this key issue that faces us. And in Ukraine, there was a referendum on independence, and this issue was the key. And the people who announced that they understood that independence of the state is not possible without referendum. And Crimea, they voted for independence. And it is the mechanisms that are strong for the future development of Ukraine and its position in the international arena. And now Ukraine is not in the framework of Ukrainian discussions, but decisions are taken outside the country. And the Minsk agreement shows that there is only one date, the changes to the constitution that do not take into account the opinion of people and through constitutional assembly, but without taking into account the position of people, and to conduct a referendum or a study and to pose questions, the answer will be evident, and this survey will be the results of this survey will be provided to the public soon. And it's impossible to find common grounds with people who have other values. An example from our company. We had an employee for 5 or 6 years, and he was from Donetsk, and he came to his employer and said, I want to return to Donetsk, and the answer was why, and the question was why, and he said, I had different values, and he got his salary and everything was okay, but I see that we will face situation, not only political situation, but even deeper situation. If these changes are carried out and implemented into the constitution, what we will do next? And Canadian Premier Mr. Chrétien was originally from Quebec, and he imagine that someone who is in the occupied territories of Donbas who will vote for independent Ukraine. And we should understand that there is a deep problem, and we should have a direct strategy. And without public discussion, it is impossible to reach this. Thank you. And I give the floor to civil activist Josef Zisels. Good afternoon. We have a sad analysis of the situation, but we cannot do anything with this. We are not pessimists. We have some optimistic views. We are realists mainly. Expert community differs from political sphere because politicians, they think one thing and do another, and expert community should be united in their thoughts and declarations and their activity. And we should be maybe we are more pessimistic, but the situation is in different aspects. What about Donbas, about Crimea and Donbas? I have a feeling that they are getting apart from us. They are like islands. You know the book Crimea Island by Aksionov, and I feel that these regions, they are far from us. And in Donbas, before the conflict, about 6.5 million, there were about 6.5 residents, and now half of people are left there. And I see that 2 million that fled Donbas, and it's very difficult to consider the situation, elections or anything else. It's difficult to do anything without these people. About 1.5 million fled to Ukrainian territory, and there were 300 or 400 who fled to Russia. Some people who went back, and people moved, but this in April 2014, there was a survey in 8 oblasts of Ukraine, of southeast of Ukraine. 8 oblasts took part in the survey, and if we conducted this survey earlier, and if our government took these considerations into account, maybe the situation would be different. I won't speak even about government, but about civil society that is more dynamic than our government. And from this research, I won't give you exact data, but this research is very important. If you look at it, you can see that Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, these are oblasts, they are, I won't say separatists, because this is not a clear picture like in Canada. It's a mixed picture, and the main indicator is the presence of Russia. And these people, they are not separatists, those who are against Ukraine. They are collaborators, those who cooperate with aggressor. And this is a matter of taste, as you may know. And the matter is that this survey shows that this was going to happen. The next one is Kharkiv region. There were some attempts to create a separatist region, and in Odessa there were some problems. So the scenario that was developed after April, this was reflected in the survey, in the results of the survey. The objective picture is established, but also there are some data, and the picture is really strange. For example, in this Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, only 1/3 believe that Supreme Council is the main body of power, and the majority in the parliament was from these regions. But despite this, many people from these oblasts don't believe that this body is legitimate. So from this survey, we see, and I want to draw your attention to this, and starting from first Maidan, we, together with Oleksandr Paskhaver, discussed this, that we have two civilizational entities that are not reduced to one common ground. And these are separate values. We can live in peace if we don't enforce our values on anyone. But force was implemented, and there's war, and we can only dream that we can discuss our values and the system of our values. We say that they have anti-values, and we say, and they say that we have anti-values, but our values are different, and the answers are different. And we see that we have different ideas, and we can't take any decisions in solving such complex problems. It's not easy. And what we have now? Do Ukrainians have a common vision of future? No. We don't have common vision, and there are two civilizational directions, and people cannot have the same vision of the future. What are the scenarios? We can dream about unification, but I don't see such an opportunity in the next 10 years. And I don't think that Donbas will join Russia, because there are many indicators that it won't happen. And I think that maybe this will be some uncertain period. So they won't join, or they will not detach themselves from us. So no peace, no war, and it can last for decades. And there will be some generation of people that, like in Transnistria, and we should remember about the experience of Abkhazia. And I see that every day, every year, it goes far and far, and the generation, there are 2 million people who get accustomed to the situation, and in Transnistria and Abkhazia there are many bandits, there are drugs trafficking, and there is such a modus vivendi. They are accustomed to live there, and they are not separatists or collaborators, but they cannot leave because of some problems. And it means that this research that was carried out, it shows that those who were not separatists and didn't believe in these ideas, they left. And this separation was determined according to the situation, according to the values. Those who fled to Russia, those who fled to Ukraine, this was majority, and they have values that are close to Ukrainian values. And we have frozen conflict. And what should we do with this? There's no frozen conflict. We can only dream about it. Like in Transnistria, they don't kill people every day. There's no shellings, about 40 or 60 shellings a day. They live in peace. They got accustomed to the situation, and there's no war. And we have war. And the leadership of this war is in Russia, and they will continue this work until it is beneficial to Russia. And they want to exhaust all the forces of ours. And this is the task of Ukraine. They want to prevent us from moving ahead to Europe due to this conflict, and it will. This conflict will continue, and it will economize on everything in order to provide people and money for this conflict. And I am not optimistic that Russia will be exhausted soon. They have really great reserves. And as to the seizure, You can look at the history, and for example, Russian Empire, USSR, about Finland, for example, Karelia, Finlandia, Western Ukraine, Bukovina, and part of Bessarabia, Chinese territories, Japanese territories. All this, Russia has parts of these territories. Despite Japan, for example, it's a powerful, developed country, and China is also strong, but they cannot get those territories from them without use of force, and we can use force in Donbas because people live there, and no one will shell the cities, and so there will be a period of uncertainty. And as to re-socialization, what about those 1.5 million people from Donbas who live there? What in Ukraine? What is done in order to return them to society? Civil society is trying to do something, but state is not involved, and the state acts like that. They repel these people. They are in Ukraine. They have motivation to live here. And those who are in Donbas now, how can we make them the citizens of Ukraine? It's even difficult to dream about it. We have some projects, building bridges, not walls. We create a European camp for children, and it's very difficult to work with the hundreds of kids and to create opportunities for them, and because the state doesn't provide this, and this conflict is for a long time, and we should be ready to live with this conflict, and we can't do anything about it. We should live with it, and there should be less victims of this conflict, and we should build a country like Israel to live in peace, having a military conflict. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm giving the floor to the honored economist of Ukraine, Oleksandr Paskhaver. Several theses. The first thesis, without proofs, we need more time for evidence, to gather evidence. This concerns not only Russian culture, the part of population of Donbas, it also concerns Russian cultured population of Crimea. Under any circumstances, they will be willing to live in Ukraine, and they will be willing to accept Ukraine. People with other mentality, you can look into Tyrol's in Italy or in Spain. You can look into Basque situation, the more peaceful situation with Scotland and Ireland. These conflicts, they burn for centuries. Now we are talking about dozens of years, and it is unlikely that we can get peaceful citizens among Russian cultured citizens of Ukraine in Donbas and in Crimea. I'm talking now in the interests of Ukraine. If we join them with Ukraine, we will get the opposition to everything, to every step being taken in Ukraine. This can paralyze the process of modernization in Ukraine. So this is in the interest of Ukraine not to include the voters of those from those territories. Otherwise, we will get the other Ukraine, the Ukraine which will move in the other direction than Ukraine is moving now. Understand that the sense that my proposal may look ugly to establish some reservations. This is impossible. but such situations happen after the civil war in the USA. The southern part of the USA and the northern part of the USA, they were restricted with some borders, and inclusion into Ukraine of those regions, Donbas and Lugansk occupied regions, this would hamper modernization in Ukraine, and for many dozens of years they will remain in this situation. In Donbas, the matter in question is the point is that there are settlements which, according to historically, they belong to the Don troops. And in Crimea, this is the mountainous territory. What can be done in such conditions? We should think about our security and modernization. I offer to you to think of legitimate, real ways to detach those regions in such a way so that they can't be the sources of counter-revolution. There are many examples of such enclaves. For example, Puerto Rico was associated with the USA, but it did not vote. And you know about the free cities. They were associated with some countries, but they did not vote. I mean that voting is the main problem for Ukraine. Those millions of people may vote, and this would cause problems to the development of Ukraine. I would like all of us to think it over how can we do it so. I'm not talking about the economic problems. Can we prevent the influence of those people so that they do not bring counter-revolution into our society? How can we do that? By the referendum or by the constitution. You know, the constitutions, they are not drawn by the people, by the general public. The constitutions they are usually drafted by some prominent politicians. So the matter of referendum or opinion polling, this would result in non-progressive constitution that would be drafted. Prominent people who drafted constitutions, those teams who drafted constitutions, they self-organized, just like Ukrainian public some time ago, but they also reconciled those wordings of constitutions. They reconciled them with the parliamentarians, with the MPs elected by the people. This is the approach of future, but this is my attitude to the constitution and to the referendum. That is why I will be for such point of view that the work under the constitution should be the work of experts, but not of the grassroots public. Thank you very much, and I'm giving the floor to Ms. Serhiy Ismahilov, mufti of Ukrainian Muslim Association Umma. I would Good afternoon. I'm very grateful on behalf of the people who remained in the temporary occupied territory. I am from Donetsk myself, and I have been receiving information both from Donbas and Crimea, from occupied territories, and I would like to tell about several points. It was our collective vision. People who now reside in those temporary occupied territories, they sent me proposals, and I would like to represent here their collective thoughts. The Crimean residents asks Ukraine not to exchange Crimea for some liberation of Donbas. Sometimes we can think, we can hear the ideas to ask the Russian Federation to liberate Donbas instead of the Crimea, so that the Crimea remain in the Russian Federation. So we should not leave Crimea or exchange it for Donbas. Ukraine should stand for Ukrainian Crimea always. And in the context of my previous statement, the territory of Donbas also should not be exchanged for some other conditions. We should not leave Donbas territories. Then separatists in any region, in Kharkiv or Odessa, they will understand that under some circumstances, any part of Ukrainian territory can be taken away. Our country should be strong and should not abandon any parts of its territories under pressure of separatism. Organizing such opinion and attitudes in society among the public, let us abandon Donbas because all of them are separatists. Ukraine will then will not be able to cope with the separatist movement parading in Ukraine, which will then just play again the scenarios of separatism in other parts of Ukraine. And we should remember that only 1/3 of Donbas is occupied, but not the whole territory of Donbas. And for successful liberation of the territories, we have examples such as Mariupol, Konstantinivka, Slaviansk. All those towns, they were occupied, but further than were liberated. There were just some minimum efforts were put there, and separatist supporters, they can't peddle these ideas, and those supporters of Ukraine now conduct many cultural public events to demonstrate that those towns are Ukrainian towns, and to educate youth and citizens, other citizens, and they show us examples how can we liberate other cities and recover cultural and political situation and citizenship spirit there. So it is possible. Many ideological efforts should be put into addressing the population, but we have positive precedents. Thousands of Ukrainians have died in this war, and if we abandon the territories of Donbas, and this would be the great territory, this means that all those victims are in vain, and we failed to defend our territory, and all the resources have been used in vain, and the victims died in vain. The fourth point, millions of people fled to the other territories of Ukraine from Donbas and Crimea, which are occupied, and they tried to resettle, but anyway they are waiting for the chance to return home, to return to Donbas. People have been arrested there in Donbas territory because they returned home from other territories of Ukraine. They moved back. More than 1 million people returned there, and this million of people, they will play a very good role after the territories will be liberated. Most of the IDPs, they are willing to return back, and not only collaboration is remains there. Many our citizens remain there who are willing to join with Ukraine, and those people just feel themselves in danger. They feel that their life is threatened. That is why they do not articulate their thoughts that they are willing to join with Ukraine. And there are some people who has not decided which power they would like to have. The situation was like that in Kramatorsk and Slaviansk and Mariupol. After their liberation, many people changed their opinion, and they stopped to support separatism. And if the elite in that region maintained Donbas encapsulated from other regions of Ukraine, and there were many myths that Donbas is a special region with people with some different mentality than other Ukrainians, and this regional elite, it used to keep that region in such a state that nothing from Ukraine culture, language, they did not penetrate those territories. That is why people are so inert and indifferent on those areas. And the other point is, unfortunately, the separatists are not brought to liability in Ukraine. I mean, bureaucrats who were civil servants and who delivered the oath, but they have not been brought resort to the liability for their support to separatism. And when we ask now those who are now working for occupational power, people are, we ask those people, what will you do when the towns and cities and the territories will be liberated from separatism? Those people are saying that they will just give some bribes to Ukrainian civil servants and everything will be okay. This is just the question of the amount of bribe. This problem should be addressed in Kyiv, not in Donetsk. This is the problem of corruption. When this region will be returned to Ukraine, we will have to put much efforts. We should broadcast Ukrainian TV channels. Only radio broadcast is available on those territories. Even people who are willing to get information about Ukraine, who would like to read Ukrainian news, they can't read them even in the internet resources because the web pages are blocked. Separatists now educate children in those spirit of DPR, LPR. They use Russian approaches, Russian propaganda approaches in educating the school children when they demonstrate Ukraine like an enemy. But we should remember that the things were the same in the USSR. Just people should be fed there. They do not have money, they do not have food, they are impoverished. And many people there, they even try now start to remember that the situation was much better under the Ukrainian reign. And I was proposed by Ukrainians who reside now in the occupied territories. These are their views which are articulated.
10.
So we have another 10 minutes and I have a proposition. Maybe we can answer the questions. Good afternoon, Ritke Vyacheslav. I am a resident of Donbas, and in 2014 I had to come here. Now I live here, and I am an activist, and I would like to tell you that if we had a magic wand and change everything, we won't change everything fast in Donbas, and there is an external factor, and we should develop Ukraine. Oleksandr Paskhaver said a very good thing that specialists should work on constitution, and we have a lot of people who are not specialists in the system of government. And when there won't be external factor, the situation will improve there. And in order to improve the situation, we should remove external factor, and we don't know when it will happen, and to focus on the development of the country. People will follow the lead, and the changes happen. And it's good that we have such ideas. We should have more discussions like this with people from Donbas. And there shouldn't be any break. The effort, they tried to introduce Ukrainian language fast, and it only deteriorated the situation. I'm a Russian-speaking Ukrainian, and I know that that capsule, it really existed, and it will it will disappear, but slowly. This was a valuable contribution to the discussion. And now I speak Russian. Maybe I value Russian-speaking Ukrainian so much. I can change from one language to another really fast. And we have less than 10 minutes, and I have a proposal. First, I would like to tell you that you have really a great comment, and we start the dialogue as to the fate of Donbas. We can only put something into the pot, and I give 1 minute and 1 minute to each speaker to answer the following question. If I was a president, what would I do? 1, 2, 3 concerning Donbas and prospects, the development of the situation, and some broad dialogue will be carried out. And in this framework, we had the opportunity to speak, and now let's have a rigid timeline. So 1 minute each speaker, please concentrate. First, I won't even dream about it. I don't think of being a president of this country, but if the president could articulate his position more understandably, I would support him, because I believe that all of us here in Ukraine, we should support the power, but in order to support it, they should communicate their ideas clearly. And I would say, I would tell the truth, and I would act in accordance with the circumstances of this truth. And throughout Ukraine, concerning position to the Donbas, I would believe that Donbas is not a territory. This is primarily people, and we should identify who are those people who identify themselves with this community, with this territory, and speak with them. And that people should be involved in the process. There should be public discussions and public leadership headed by the president. I agree that we should return not territory but people. If I was a president, first I would stop corruption, stop illegal trade with Donbas, and I would make the status legal and clear. Also, I would change communication strategy to proactive communication. And 1.5 years ago, civil society had proposals on how to communicate with the East. And the third one, I, as a president, wouldn't try to force the parliament to introduce some changes to constitution. And if I was a president, I would give the initiative to the Constitutional Assembly, represented by civil society activists. Thank you.
I can't be on the place of the president, but what would I do? I would conduct a referendum, because if Cyprus, Holland, Netherlands can perform referenda, so we also can conduct referendum to outline next steps. I don't believe that Donbas can be integrated in Ukraine soon, but looking into the long-term strategy, we can do that. Not as a president, but just 3 next steps. And I would like Kononenko to flee from the parliament, to abandon the parliament, and 300 more parliamentarians. This is not my proposal. The first step is the economy on military grounds. The economy should work for defense purpose. Then the reform in the armed forces of Ukraine, because only when we have balance in the forces with the Russian Federation, then we will survive. Then absorption or adaptation of those Donbas residents who are willing to live in the territory of Ukraine. And then we should understand that what shall we do if Ukraine, if the Russian Federation collapse, what will Ukraine then do? I'm afraid of that. As concerned the all Ukrainian proposals, I will submit them to the president, and I have been informing the president of my proposals. And as concerned independent enclaves forming of the Crimea and the part of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, which are now occupied by DPR and LPR. If Ukraine is secure, maybe Ukrainian troops may guard the borders in those limits which we see now. But this proposal can give impetus in our negotiations with Kremlin and other countries. This would be absolutely new idea, and I would offer 4 theses. The first, in communication, it is required so that Ukrainian information is communicated to the occupied territories, because they do not have outreach, no information, Ukrainian information get the occupied territories. The second is the corruption. We should combat corruption to become attractive for those territories. The third point is the economy. The country's resources will not be siphoned away, and then we will look attractive, and the residents of the occupied territories will move to us themselves. And the fourth point is the integrity of the territory of Ukraine. We should not agree to some amendments to the constitutions in order to satisfy some requirements. Thank you, dear friends. And now we end our event. We gathered different people into this initiative of November 21st because they have different ideas. That is why we can have inclusive dialogue in which all stakeholders and citizens of Ukraine can take part, and we hope very much that our such provocative meeting of today with differing opinions will provide us the opportunity to start discussion in the society about the fate of Donbas. In 1 month we will have the same discussion about the Crimea. I understand why Mr. Ismahilov was talking about the Crimea, but the situation is Crimea is a little bit different, and a separate discussion should be conducted in 1 month, and I invite our audience to listen to the next discussion. And about today's discussion, I am asking the journalists to bring this topic from the government's offices to the general public, to the grassroots, so that every person, every IDP, and all citizens of Ukraine think it over, what to do, what the fate of Donbas should be. Otherwise, we will proceed provoking myths and some mysterious policy in the government. The policy should be transparent and honest. People should think it over, what policy Ukraine will have, and have the right to speak prior to the referendum or after the referendum in the wide public discussions. Without public discussions, Ukraine can't exist. This is the change brought to our life by Maidan. Our citizens will never agree to mysterious diplomacy any longer. Thank you very much for your attention.